By the end of this video, you'll be able to read an entire book in a day, maybe even in an hour, and remember it for life. But how is it possible to read faster and remember more, especially considering the tricks most how-to-read fast videos talk about? Eye training, using peripheral vision, following your finger to increase eye speed, reading multiple books at once, even force flashing words across your eyes at superhuman speeds. Yeah, no, don't do that. You're not going to remember a single thing when you cram 1,000 words down your throat every minute, or subliminally try and incept concepts into your head. No one actually reads like that. As a board-certified doctor with 3 Ivy League degrees who's had to read a bajillion books to get here, I'll tell you my secret to being able to read a book a day and remember it for life. In the first part of this video, I'll talk about a few important concepts before introducing to you my 3-step framework that gets to what really matters when you read: growing new brain connections. Because think about it, what are you really trying to do when you read? You don't actually want to read faster, you want to learn faster. You want your brain to retain it, to keep it so your life actually improves in some measurable way. First concept is this: not all words are created equally. Put quite simply, you don't have to read all the words. Many authors, unfortunately, don't have your best interests in mind. They'll fill things with fluff, they use redundant examples, they intentionally use obtuse language to look smarter. It's not their fault. The author's simply human. I fall into this trap all the time, in fact. I often write things because I like the way the sentence flows, because I like how it sounds, because it makes me feel good. Point is, the words the author puts on paper serves the first master first, him or herself. You are but a fly on the wall, trapped in the thoughts of another. If I'm lucky, I revise the crap out of what I write from the audience's perspective. If you're lucky, I cut it to the bone so you get exactly what you need. That's how you write relevantly and concisely. But not all authors will do that, so it's your job to do so. Feel free to surgically cut through it yourself to get exactly what you need. The way you do so is with the second concept, the map. How do you know what words are important and what words to skip? Simply put, you cheat. Get the Spark Notes ultra-condensed 5-minute version of the book first and read that. You are not the first person to read this book. There are probably summaries and discussions about it everywhere. Wikipedia, YouTube, ChatGPT. The idea isn't to replace the book with a substandard summarized one, but to build a working map for yourself. Think of each new book as uncharted territory, a strange and mystical land you are about to explore. Trying to get around somewhere new in real life without a map is pretty dumb. Sure, you may figure it out eventually and get to your destination, but it's going to be as inefficient as hell. A book is the same. Unless you are reading a book for fun, never go into it without an understanding of what is about to happen. That big picture understanding is your map. Armed with this blueprint, you immediately know what is relevant and what is bullshit. Scan through each paragraph and make a split-second assessment. Is this relevant or is this bullshit? If relevant, read. If very relevant or very interesting, take your time to really digest it. In fact, read it a few times if needed. If it's bullshit, skip to the next paragraph or section immediately. Think of yourself as a ruthless, award-winning editor actually tasked with editing the book before publication. This paragraph wasn't really needed. You didn't get to the point here. This is just reiterating the same idea once again. This is just transition. This is filler. Wait. Whoa. Let me read this part again. This section, this one's money. When you do this, you'll quickly realize how redundant and inefficient most authors are. Being succinct and making each word count is an art. Moreover, you quickly become a better reader, writer, and connoisseur. It's like evaluating wine. Be critical. Your time is valuable. Every author should respect that. With this method, you should be able to blaze through pages quickly because, again, you aren't reading every word. But what if what you're reading is more technical, like a textbook, for example? Same idea. Use the table of contents, chapter headings, and subheadings of each section to help you get the big picture ideas. This is called building the skeleton. Get a sense of the structure and the main ideas of each section without diving into the details. Build the skeleton before you fill in the meat. What's the purpose of each section? What are the main takeaways? Are there prerequisites I need to have before I can understand this? Again, the author is human and has no idea where you are coming from. They maybe assume you have the basics. They have their blind spots. Maybe it makes sense in their heads, but they suck at delivering, at teaching. So stop wasting your time. Is there another resource that simplifies this or approaches it from a different angle? Better yet, how important is knowing this part? If it's foundational to the rest of the book, take your time and really understand it. If it's not, maybe just knowing the gist is good enough. Don't get caught in the weeds. Move on to something more high yield. Point is, reading a book should be like a choose your own adventure story. Rarely is a book meant to be read cover to cover. This is the crux of the third concept, the purpose. Let's say you just bought a fancy new vacuum cleaner, but you don't know how to install the bag. Oh, thank God there's an instruction manual. But are you starting on page 1 and reading page by page, word after word until the last page? Of course not. You leaf through and zero in on exactly the section that is relevant to your situation. Probably just a paragraph or maybe a single diagram that explains what you need to know. And that's all you need. Treat all books in the same way. Approach with purpose, with ruthless efficiency. There should be a single question in your head at all times, some problem you're trying to solve. What am I reading this book for? What is the point of this? I know. It feels wrong. It feels like you can't say you've read a book until you've literally read it from cover to cover. But ask yourself, what do you value more? A silly feeling of accomplishment or actually having practical, usable information in your head? Stop worrying about collecting notches on your belt. Stop trying to impress. Reading is not done for others, it's done for yourself. Of course, caveat to this is if you're just reading for fun, you enjoy the author's prose, how he uses words to paint and tickle the canvas of your mind. If that's the case, then your purpose is entertainment. You are enjoying a book like you would a movie. But if you're here to upgrade your brain, you need to approach with surgical precision. With this in mind, you are ready for the fourth concept, the trio. Whenever you read, there's a hierarchy of brain functions you engage and turn on in a stepwise fashion. Passive reading, active reading, and applied reading. I've personified them and given them names. Ideally, there should always be 3 voices in your head when you read: the collector, the curator, and the connector. Most people only have the collector when they read. This is also known as passive reading, passively collecting words and doing nothing with them. Words simply enter your brain like ghostly whispers and vanish into poofs of smoke, quickly replaced by the next. It's like your mind is an empty tunnel and the words bleed together like a never-ending train, entering and exiting just as quickly. You ever feel like you finished reading an entire page but barely register what happened? The train came, entered your head, but because you never did anything with it, it simply left the tunnel. This is the most primitive form of passive reading. But even regular passive reading where you do register the words is problematic. It forces yourself to dutifully keep pace with how fast the train runs, i.e. how fast the words can flash across your eyes. And we already talked about this. Because you aren't curating the words you read and evaluating how worthy each paragraph is of your time, you are forced to keep pace with the author's whims and fancies, and thus you are forced to rely on fancy techniques to speed up the train, with eye training, finger tracking, mental focus, which again is just stupid, because it doesn't engage your brain at all. It doesn't make you think, and just stresses to you the value of speed above all else. And what's the problem with speed? You inundate your brain with information without taking the time to integrate them into your deep memory networks. When you speed read 50 pages of dense text filled with ideas and nuance, how much of that are you realistically retaining? Your brain only has so much bandwidth. Divert all your attention to speed and you sacrifice comprehension. Okay, but what if you speed read at a level where you still understand what is going on? Sure, you may understand the concepts, but you don't get to keep them. Information hits the working memory centers of your brain, but this is short term. Just like how you can register someone telling you their name in the moment, i.e. comprehension, but because your attention quickly moved on, it's not at all surprising when later you're all like, crap, what's the dude's name again? And then you stew in your awkwardness when you realize it's too late to ask again, so you just call him bro or dude for the rest of eternity. Here's an irrefutable fundamental aspect of the brain. Superficially gained information is superficially lost. Speed reading is exactly that. You push your mind to hit the next word, and the next, and the next, replacing each one as quickly as humanly possible. When you do that, there's no way you're focused on learning. Your brain quite literally doesn't have the resources to grow actual brain connections. To actually connect what you're learning to existing knowledge networks, you need real reflection and analysis of what the author is trying to say. And that takes effort. That takes energy. That's why people say to let things sink in after you learn something. It literally takes time for your brain to capture and store information. If you want a deeper dive into how you actually learn from the perspective of what's going on in the brain, check out this video. This is why it's so important to engage the higher functions of your prefrontal cortex, the executive centers of your brain. This is where the curator of that trio comes in, and this is the basis for active reading. This is all the stuff we've already talked about, concepts 1, 2, and 3. Think of it this way. There's a little guy in your head doing the actual reading. That's the passive reading guy, the collector. He's just collecting information. But because you're awesome and you've watched this video, you know to bring online another guy doing the actual curation, the curator. This is the guy standing behind your shoulder telling you, don't read this, don't read that, that's stupid, jump over here. Why are we reading this again? Where on the map are we now? But if you really want to be awesome and retain everything you learn, you bring in the third guy. This is the applied reading guy. This is who I call the connector. He's here to make sure you remember this stuff for the long run and connect what you read to the deepest parts of your brain. What does neuroscience tell us? Brain cells that fire together wire together. You want every time you read to be an actual session where real brain connections are grown. So how do you grow brain connections? The same way you grow beastly biceps and six-pack abs. You expend effort with actual, real brain exercise. In other words, you need to apply what you read and exercise your brain in real time as you read. First exercise is called the review. We've kind of talked about this already, and it's something you should always be doing. Every time you read something, ask yourself, what concept is the author trying to say? Is this concept new to me? Is this concept relevant to me and my purpose or question? After you do that, flow directly into the second exercise, the debate. Do I agree with this concept? Does it gel with what I know? Could the author be wrong? Even if I do agree with the author, what problems do I see with it? If I had to play devil's advocate, what would I point to? What would he or she then say in response? Do you see what is going on? You're taking what you just learned and wiring them together with ideas and concepts from existing neuronal networks, manipulating them together in your mind's eye like a Rubik's Cube. Feeling around, seeking new angles and perspectives you haven't yet thought about. You are literally forcing new brain connections to grow from what you know to capture what is new. Fact of the matter is, no concept can exist in the void untethered as an isolated piece of information. To keep anything, you have to make it relevant and you have to tie it down with context. Third exercise is called the professor. This is where you begin to use and apply the information and make it your own. Ask yourself, can you do a TED Talk about what you just learned? What stories would you include? What examples from your life would you bring into this talk? Can you then simplify it and teach it to a fifth grader? Can you explain it in a 1-minute elevator pitch? Actually try it. After you read, talk about it, write about it, teach it to a friend. If there's no one, record yourself giving your future self the highlights of what you just learned. As you talk about it, you'll reveal to yourself where holes in your understanding are, and thus be able to strengthen your understanding by patching those up on the second go around. The final exercise is called Future You. Whenever you learn something, ask yourself, how does learning this impact your life or make it better? Was this a useful use of your time? Or knowing what you know now, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to make sure your life is measurably better because of what you just learned? Because if you don't remember what you learned, you might as well have never even learned it, right? Do you think future you, 5 years down the road, will remember what you just learned? What can you do to ensure he or she has access to this knowledge? By the way, highlighting the book, writing down your thoughts in some digital notebook doesn't work, because come on, realistically, you aren't ever coming back to these notes again, and the process of writing it down may even hurt you. Take photographs, for example. You're in the middle of some awesome event, right? Spending time with your homies. You want to preserve and remember this memory. So what do you naturally want to do? Snap a crap ton of pictures, right? According to psychology professor Elizabeth Loftus of UC Irvine, even snapping photos harms the brain's ability to retain memories. One, because we offload the responsibility of remembering to the camera, so our brain stops building the brain connections. And two, you're so distracted and busy doing the photo taking that you don't properly process the moment altogether. Same happens with superficial rote writing, or worse, copying and pasting sentences that you like. You get what you focus on. If you don't properly integrate the concepts into your head and rush to write it down instead, you fall into the same trap. Focus on growing brain connections instead. If something is useful enough, you want it in your brain. You want access to it at all times so you can use it as a foundation for future concepts and connections. Obviously, depending on what you're reading, different exercises will apply. You don't have to do them all. Point is, actively engage your brain and apply what you learn to everything you read in a very meaningful way. With all that said, I hope you can see what the 3-step framework looks like. Whenever you read, always do 3 non-negotiable steps. First is to prep. Understand why you're about to read this book. Have a purpose, a reason, a question you want answered. Then pre-read to build your skeleton and have a map of what to expect. Second step is to read, but to read actively. I give you license to generously skip. Use your map and your purpose to guide you. Read only the essentials of what you need for this particular go-around. It's okay to come back to the book in the future and repeat the 3 steps when you have another purpose. Third step is to apply and immediately engage your brain so what you learn is tethered into long-term memory. And that's it, folks. I hope this video gave you something of value. If so, please consider becoming a Patreon member and support me in my efforts to grow and scale this channel even more. Also, consider becoming a SUBSTACK member to get early access to ideas just like this one. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet to YouTube, please do so and then go tell your friends, your grandma, and your pet hamster. Until next time, my friends, smell you later.